Officer of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. It's 1 o'clock here in Geneva, and so we are happy to have you with us for this afternoon's briefing on the invitation for comments to the draft reporting guidance. And I shall be joined today by my two colleagues, Richard Gutierrez, who's our program officer specifically assigned to national reporting, and also Lynn Doan, who assists the so-called reporting hub. Thank you. You can see now my colleagues, of course, also on the screen, as we would like to take you through the process of commenting and other related information on national reporting. Let's dig right in. We have an hour in front of us, and we shall hopefully, or we shall limit our comments in such a way that there's also enough question time available for you to support you on this endeavor. If I may turn to the next slide. The focus of our briefing is set out here. Decision 4.8 of the COP that met in Bali. There's a decision specific on national reporting pursuant to Article 21. It has various aspects or various elements in that decision, but specifically paragraph 6b refers to the reporting guidance and specifically requests the Secretariat to seek by the 15th of December 2022 any additional comments from parties and other stakeholders on the draft reporting guidance that take into account their experience of completing the full first reports. So that's the focus of the briefing, and we've divided it into 4 chapters, if you will, where I will first present the background on the draft reporting guidance, and then the invitation for any additional comments as per the request in decision 4.8. Lynn will then give you an update of the first full report submitted for the reporting period 16th August 2017 to 31st December 2020 that were submitted for the deadline 31st December. And Richard will then give you a forward-looking heads up on the upcoming deadline for the second short reports. And of course, the reporting period for that is from January 2021, 1st of January 2021 to the 31st of December 2022. And submittal is due by the 31st of December 2023. And then, as mentioned, we plan to have enough time also available for any questions or clarifications that you may you might have. With that, let me dig right into the next slide, and to give you a bit of background on the draft reporting guidance. You may be well aware of this already, but for those of you that might not be, or for colleagues that you might want to pass this information on to. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, Pablo. So where does the reporting guidance come from? Here you will see in decision COP3 decision COP 313, there was a request to the Secretariat to prepare guidance for completing the national reporting format. The rationale that was found by COP3 at the time was the recognized need for complete and consistent national reporting to provide enough and complete information on the implementation status as called for by Article 21, but also to provide information for compliance and also for effectiveness evaluation purposes. That same decision also encouraged parties to use the draft reporting guidance on a provisional basis to assist in the preparation of their full national reports that were submitted by the end of 31st December 2021. In other words, this draft guidance was prepared for consideration at COP4, but it was also already on a provisional basis to be useful for parties as they were preparing for the first full national reports. And so many of you may have been part of this whole journey already, but at the risk of repetition, let me just say here that the draft guidance was then passed to COP4 as document 17, and it's outlined here in terms of the structure of the draft guidance. The first section recalls the reporting obligations as per the format that was decided by COP1. It also clarifies the reporting periods, and it gives guidance on the online reporting tool, or what we've started to call the ORT, for parties to be able to submit their reports electronically. The second section gives an overview of the draft guidance, and it speaks to the parts A to E. It sets out that the short reports request parties to answer 4 questions, namely on mining, on stocks, on trade, and on final disposal, while the full reports, which are due every 4 years, requests parties to give responses on 43 questions that go all the way through almost all of the articles of the convention. There is mandatory information that needs to be submitted. There are also supplemental areas, and the guidance sets out all of that. And then the section 3, which is the largest section, is the section that then goes part by part, but also question by question, to give parties a sense of background information necessary in terms of the notes, and then also puts forward a suggested approach that the party may wish to take. And all of that is also transposed, or was also available through the online reporting format. Going to the next slide. So this is an overall visual of all the work that has already gone into supporting parties on reporting, but also to show you where we are now in terms of further work on reporting guidance. So if I may take you back in time just a bit, at COP1 in 2017, as mentioned, Decision 1.8 was passed, and Decision 1.8 includes the reporting format for all parties of the Minamata Convention, and it also includes the timing. The first short reports were due by the end of 2019, and the reporting period for those were from the entry into force of the convention, that's the 16th of August 2017, until the end of 2018, giving countries, of course, a year to compile the relevant information to be ready to put into our online reporting system, which was not at that stage yet called ORT, but it was a simple monkey survey setup at the time, and were submitted by the end of 2019. You may recall that at the time, the Secretariat produced an information note just to help guide and give further information on the 4 questions that are part of the short reports. In other words, some information on mining, some in the provisions on mining and primary mercury mining, some of the provisions on identifying stocks and sources, some of the information related to consent forms for export and import of mercury, and lastly, some information on final disposal. In other words, the 4 key questions or 4 recurrent questions that parties report on every 2 years. Following COP3, or at COP3, there was this recognition that that even more information would be needed than an information note that the Secretariat had at that stage produced. And so COP3 passed Decision 313 that explicitly requested the Secretariat to draft reporting guidance. And so the journey of our draft reporting guidance began. Throughout 2020, we worked on drafting the guidance, and the draft guidance was then also put to comment for a comment period with parties and stakeholders. The call went out in May for that, and parties submitted many comments that were extremely helpful and insightful, also from a national perspective, and also from the perspective of the interpretations perhaps, but certainly the perspectives on the obligations underlying the different questions. These comments were received in June last year and were then incorporated into the finalized document that the Secretariat produced for COP4, the document 17, which is the draft reporting guidance. At the time, you may remember, of course, especially if you were a national focal point, that many were preparing their first full reports, and we had many different Minamata online sessions, including some in Spanish and French at the end, and including 40-day check-ins until the deadline and other such events to bring the information of the draft reporting guidance closer to parties and to assist them in finding the relevant areas also in their ministry and other ministries to put the relevant information together. And so we had also, of course, a discussion or an indication of the draft reporting guidance at COP 4.1. And we received many, many, many reports. In fact, at the end of 2021, we were extremely happy to see how many parties really took the extra effort, the extra mile, not only to prepare for COP 4.1, but certainly also to prepare for this important obligation. You see right at the bottom of the slide, the parties and stakeholders that submitted comments at the time in 2021. Here, just for clarity and transparency, these were the parties and one stakeholder that submitted comments, and we worked with each of the comments to integrate them into the draft reporting guidance that you see in document 17. But now we are in 2022, and earlier this year at COP 4.2, we had decision 4.8 that requested the Secretariat to continue to work on the reporting guidance and to seek any additional comments from parties, especially in light of their experiences of the first full reports. And that is exactly why we're meeting here today and why we are reaching out to you and all the parties and stakeholders to get any additional comments. As per the decision, the additional comments ought to reach the Secretariat by the 15th of December this year. So please note the timeline. It is to make sure we can get as much of the input in. I would also like to say here that countries that have and parties that have already submitted comments, if there are any additional comments or if you believe that perhaps a comment you made is still not fully addressed and reflected in the draft reporting guidance, please feel free to bring that to our attention. But also, we are specifically interested to know how it went in your reporting experience with regard to the draft reporting guidance that we had. Was it enough? Did you need more information? Did you need even different information added? So we are extremely open to all of your feedback and comments, and I will detail that in a moment how we would love to receive your comments. Just to look forward, the decision also requests the Secretariat to then submit the version following the comments to COP5 for consideration and for possible adoption, and hence the timeline also of the 15th of December, which allows us next year to ensure that we can incorporate and, if need be, go back to the persons that are, or the commenters to ensure that we are fully cognizant of what comments need to be included and really reflect the additional needs if there are any additional ones being identified. With that, and looking forward, I will not speak about this here, but leave it to Richard. But of course, there is already the process of getting ready for the second short reports, which are the 2-year reports for the reporting period, January 21 to December 22. Moving to the next slide. And now about the invitation for any additional comments to document 17. And next slide, please. So here we have the decision projected. And of course, we will make all of our PowerPoints available, and you will see that they are hyperlinked, so you can find your way immediately back to the decision, the original text. But I've highlighted here specifically what is written in paragraph 6. Until now, I mentioned paragraph 6b, which is the request to seek additional comments from parties and stakeholders. But just for your overview, this is all of paragraph 6 and the requests to the Secretariat, because in A, there's also the request for the Secretariat to update, I beg your pardon, to look at the reporting format and to to check for any clarity that may overall still need to be done to the remainder of the questions in the reporting format. B is what we are speaking about today, the invitation for further comments and additional comments by parties and stakeholders based on their experience of the full report so far. And then C requests the Secretariat to submit the draft reporting guidance following the commenting period and the inclusion of them to COP5 for consideration and adoption. Going to the next slide. I would like to highlight here that we have prepared a comment form and also a version of document 17 that has line indication. What you see displayed here on the left is a screenshot of the lined version. And this is to allow you to be able to take, if you would wish to comment on a particular paragraph, you could identify the line by which the paragraphs are to ensure that we are cognizant and very clear on which words you may suggest needs to be edited or which areas you may suggest for further clarification. I would like to point out here, as we wrote in the form or in the beginning of this document, the decision 4.8 also included some clarifications to the reporting format that relate to the questions 3.1, which is on mines, 3.5, which is on consent forms, and 11.12, which is the question on final disposal. And further, that the paragraph 2 of that decision also requests parties to continue their overall and ongoing endeavors to identify stocks according to COP1. I beg your pardon, there's a typo, COP1 guidance. And it also calls on parties to provide the consent forms. These additional clarifications that emanate from the decision 4.8 are not yet reflected, of course, in document 17, because this is the document as it was presented to COP. And if you wish to make specific or any additional comments on those items, please feel free to do so. But please know we did not forget as a Secretariat that we need to update those, and they would be. But we've requested your comments to be on the original document 17, so to ensure that we have version control in terms of language that we might be changing or adding to or editing for the version for COP5. And if I may have the next slide. Just to show you here, there were two clarification edits on the reporting format. The one was to, it's underlined in red, for the mining question 3.1, for the primary mercury mining question, there was to add the amount. It previously said total amount mined, and now it says total amount of mercury mined. And this is to clarify that reporting here is in terms of mercury and not in terms of ore, to allow a better understanding across reports of the amount of mercury. And for question 3.5, which is the question on consent, we noticed in the first reporting period, but certainly also in the entire first reporting period, whether it was for the short reports or the full reports, that there were some countries, of course, that did not export or import any mercury at all, and there was no way to make that clear in the answer. And so the COP suggested and requested the clarification of adding no export if a party was not engaged in export, and then would, of course, not need to seek any consent. So these are two edits that we have that will be part of the reporting format going forward, but which are not yet, of course, reflected in the document 17 as it went to COP4. And if I may go to the next slide. And just show you that on our intersessional web page, is a small write-up on the steps of the reporting guidance. There's a link to the comment form. You see the comment form here on the right-hand side of the slide. And also you have already seen a screenshot of the version of document 17 with line indication to facilitate identifying which areas you may wish to comment on. With that, we go to the next chapter of our presentation, and I would like to ask Lynn to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Lin Duan, Program Management Assistant from the Minamata Secretariat. It is my pleasure today to give you an update on the current status of reporting performance of the first full national reports due by 31st December 2021. Moving on to the next slide, please. This slide shows an overview of reporting performance of the first full national reports, which includes the information about the reporting rate, number of reports by region, reporting language, and a nice balance of national focal point gender shown in the pie chart. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the gray bar at the top gives you an overview of current reporting rate, the total number of parties required to report in the first full reporting period, how many parties have submitted their reports so far, and how many parties submitted by the deadline 31st December 2021. Of the 123 parties to the conventions that were party in the first full reporting period ending 31st December 2020, 87 parties submitted their reports by the deadline, while additional 24 parties submitted their reports as of today, 12 October 2022. So in total, this presents 90% reporting rate for the first full national report. The 12 parties those reports remain to be submitted are encouraged to do so as soon as possible. Below is the line graph gives an overview of the number of reports submitted during the period from November 2021 until now, followed by a bar chart which shows the current reporting status of reports by region as follow. 30 of 32 parties from Africa submitted their reports. 22 of 30 parties from Asia Pacific submitted their reports. 14 of 15 parties from the Eastern Europe submitted their reports. For GULAG regions, 23 parties has submitted their report. And the Western Europe and others group has completed their reporting cycle, which 100% reporting rate. As you may recall, that the pie chart shows the nice balance of the national report, national focal point gender. And as you may recall that the national focal point plays an important role for the national report, since the report is to be submitted through or by the national focal point of parties. Moving on to the next slide, please. Yeah, this slide shows the reporting rate by 31st December deadline of the first short reports and the first full reports. It is to be noted that even though the first full national report contains 43 questions in comparisons with the 4 recurring questions in the first short reports, the 2021 first full reporting rate achieved a 71% by the deadline, which was higher than the reporting rate of the first short report in 2019 at 56%. And as the Secretariat, we are delighted to be able to support parties with the series of Minamata online sections on national reporting last year, and also several reminders follow-up were sent to party on a regular basis over the course of 4 months from September to December 2021, which contributed to the overall increase of the reporting rate. Moving on to the next slide. This is to inform you that all first full national reports submitted so far are made available on the convention website. And taking this opportunity, we would also like to encourage parties those reports remain to be submitted for the first full national reporting period to hand in their reports by 31st October 2021. Sorry, excuse me, by 31st October 2022, which will enable us to include the information contained in the reports in the Secretariat post for the consideration of the Implementation and Compliance Committee at its fifth meeting in March next year. I'm now handing over to my colleagues, Richard, to walk you through the next part of the section. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Good day and good evening, everyone. And again, thank you very much for joining us today. My section of the presentation is to walk you through on the upcoming second short national reporting, which is due on 31st December 2023. May I have the next slide, please? Now, this graph provides you with an overview of the reporting cycle. May I call your attention to the very upper portion of the slide? You will see the dates, the years, and then the COPs to which it falls in. So this provides you a context into which the reporting cycle fits. Of course, you are already aware. You may be aware that COP5 will be happening on will be held on in 2023 from October 30th to November 5. This sort of segues into what I would like to highlight in the middle portion of the slide, highlighted in yellow, in light yellow. You will see the reporting period for the second short national reports, which started in January 2021 and ended and will end on the 31st of December 2022. Of note will be the submission of the report, which will be due on the 31st of December 2023. And in this regard, I'd like to note the how busy 2023 will be, given that the submission date for the second short national report will shortly be happening, will be occurring very quickly right after the COP. So in this regard, we would like to remind parties to prepare and submit early if you can. And if you're not, and let us know if you're having difficulties. And if also, we would also remind you if you are able to appoint a contact officer who can assist the national focal points in preparing the report, given the very, very tight schedule in 2023. But from there, I wanted to, I would like to get your attention to focus on the very bottom of the slide. So this gives you an overview of what we need to do, both the parties and the Secretariat, in the coming months. So on the left corner, you will see 2021 to 2022 representing the reporting period. Now, the critical point would be moving forward from January 2023 up to March of 2023. During this period, the Secretariat will be updating the reporting format and the ORT. Now, the ORT for the second short national reports will be launched in March of 2023. So kindly take note of that. Now, for those parties who wish to prepare early, the Secretariat will make available an offline version, which you can utilize to code in your responses while awaiting the launch of the ORT. And once the online reporting tool is launched, you can readily encode and transfer the data into the ORT, and then hopefully be able to submit it earlier or sooner before the COP or the deadline. The next slide. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So some important tips in completing the second short national reports. As I mentioned, plan ahead in order to secure the information that you need from the first and from the experience of the first short and full national reports. We have noted that there is a lot of coordination among departments and ministries. So in this regard, to get the data, please plan ahead and coordinate well ahead of time. Second tip is when reporting annual data, please specify the years please specify the years. And when the reporting period is not within January, that falls between January or December 31, specify the period. When answering questions, ensure that the responses are succinct, while at the same time offering a meaningful story. Fourth tip, check for consistency. We're entering our second cycle of reporting. So please take note of the consistency of responses between questions, and also importantly, in your consistency between your responses in the previous reports. It's perfectly okay if you are amending or changing, updating your answers, but please do leave a note for the Secretariat to be able to identify that this is an amended response to your previous response. We have noted, and some of you may have received emails from us checking on the consistency, and this will just be helpful in making sure that the Secretariat is aware of the updates that you are doing as well. And lastly, the units in which the last tip I have is for when you see units of measure, please provide information on amounts and be specific on the units of measures that you're using, for example, metric tons. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here is a quick overview of the 4 questions that are covered in the short national reports. Article 3 on Mercury supply sources and trade, which corresponds to question 3.1c. My colleague Claudia already has mentioned the update that we have done based on decision 4/8. Article 3 on Mercury supply sources and trade corresponds to question 3.3. There's a corresponding guidance on this, which I will share with you later. And then Article 3 on Mercury supply sources and trade, question 3.5. Again, this particular question has specific forms and guidance, which is on trade and trade forms. And lastly, Article 11 on mercury waste, which is found, or which is related to question 11. Next slide, please. So you will see in the next slide the relevant reporting guidance and forms as it pertains to question 3.3 and question 3.5. This is a screenshot of our convention website. You will find this under parties and reporting. Thank you very much. And I believe that is my last slide. I will pass the floor on to Claudia for the additional information. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and also thank you, Lynn. Before I invite you to all the other events we have planned in Minamata Online, I would like to invite you for any questions that you may have. If you could type them into the chat box, that would be very helpful. If there are any questions, may I first maybe invite any questions specific to the invitation for additional comments on the draft reporting guidance. We hope it was clear where to find the comment box, the comment form, as well as to use the lined version to assist you in your review. And we very much look forward to also your reflections on the draft reporting guidance in light of your experiences to compile the information for the full reports. So if I may invite any check-ins or any questions for clarification you may want to have on the first part of the presentation, in other words, the invitation to comment on the draft reporting guidance. We could then also, if you are interested in any other item, we could also then return to either the current national reports that have been submitted and or the upcoming work for the short reports. But if I could invite you to write any of your comments maybe into the chat, that that would be very helpful. And just to say, sometimes a question you might have might also be in somebody else's mind, but they didn't yet find the words to express them. So we definitely very much encourage any question that you might find or any check-in that you might find helpful. Let me pause for a moment. And maybe if I could ask Pablo to take us back to one of the key slides, maybe the slide under reporting guidance, the one that shows the overall timeline. Maybe it's about 6 or so, a little bit further back. Yes, that one. Maybe to jog your mind in case there's anything, or does it mean that the fact that I don't see any questions, I don't believe I see any question, maybe we were clear? I don't believe I'm seeing any questions. Oh, I do have a question, just a moment. One comes in from Tracy from Canada. Tracy writes, will the Secretariat be using results of the analysis of the full first national reports, in other words, and also the Article 21 synthesis report to highlight any areas of inconsistency or questions that may require consideration of the COP for possible amendment? Tracy, thank you very much for this question. And indeed, just as the decision requests parties to reflect on their learnings from the COP, from the first full reports and present their comments from their perspectives, we will also, of course, be looking very clearly in terms of what we are seeing coming forward through the analysis of the national reports. And let me here just pause for a moment and say that the Implementation and Compliance Committee has met already this year from the 13th to the 14th of September, and it has considered the preliminary report that the Secretariat has provided it. And in that preliminary report, the focus was on the 4 recurrent questions and the articles of those 4 recurrent questions. So in other words, we have done a preliminary report to the ICC on the responses to all the questions in Article 3 and all the questions in Article 11. And we are working on the document for the next, the in-person, the big, so to speak, ICC meeting, which will happen next March, and are working through all of the responses for the other areas. And I can already say that some of the clarifications that were given by COP4 regarding question 3.1, regarding question 3.5, and also regarding question 11.2 will be helpful for sure in the next reporting cycle. So that has already, we can already see that in the national reports. And as the decision also requests, if I may ask Pablo just to go, I think 1 or so slides forward. Yes, here you see the decision actually requests in 6A, this, and may I read it, on the basis of parties' experiences of completing the first full reports, which were due by December 31st, 2021, to identify any questions regarding the reporting format that may pose challenges to parties in responding and to propose clarifications. So here, completely indeed, Tracy, we are trying to work hand in hand and sort of in parallel to parties. And may I therefore also say that any comments that that parties and stakeholders may wish to make on the reporting guidance, if they themselves have seen that something is not clear in a question, that of course goes hand in hand, and we would very much welcome your reflection as well in terms of how that question either does or doesn't work out in your national context. Mindful, of course, that this is the reporting format from as decided by the COP, and so there was a specific rationale for those questions, but it could have been that it could be made a bit more clearer, and this is the time to do a bit of filing and streamlining if necessary. I hope that has given a bit of more clarity on that. Thank you, Tracy. I see I see that there's another question that's come just through another channel. And may I read the question? It's from Jarad. It says, do signatories to the Minamata Convention report to the Minamata Convention? And the answer is no, they are not obliged to report to the Minamata Convention. The Minamata Convention only becomes effective for a party once the instrument of ratification has been deposited with the UN depository. So while I would say almost all signatories are now also parties, we have a small handful of signatories that are not yet parties, and we hopefully will have them on board very, very soon. But it's only once the convention is in force for them, and the process is that once the the signatory, once the country has deposited its ratification instrument with the UN depository and has been accepted and cleared at that level, that after 90 days, the country would be, the obligations of the convention would be applicable to that country in its national context and international dealings. And it's only from then onwards that Article 21 would be in force, so to speak, for the party to report. And let me just say, though, that some signatories and some other parties or some other countries that are not yet members of the inner circle of Minamata in terms of being parties have already identified national focal points. So they are being informed of all the work we are doing in Minamata and are taking an active interest, possibly also in time or to help them in their ratification efforts, but they are not yet required to report. I see another question, this one from Florian, so may I read it out? Yes, COP4 requested the Secretariat to draft a revised reporting format under Article 21 to collect information on the measures taken related to the provisions that were added by the amendment to Annex A, Part 2, for consideration at its 5th meeting. And Florian, you are completely right, and I must admit I have neglected to put that on the slide, and it's completely true. It is the updated reporting format will not only include the clarifications that come from decision 4.8 that I mentioned here, but in decision 4.3, which is the decision following the review of annexes A and B, as you will recall, the COP decided to, by consensus, decided to amend the Annex A, which is the annex on mercury added products. And that annex consists of two parts, the first being a list of product categories for phase out, and then a second part which has the product dental amalgam, and it consists of measures that parties are to take for the phase down of the use of mercury. In fact, we will have to look therefore both at part 1 and part 2 and make the adjustments in the reporting format, so that certainly for the part under part 2, which is dental amalgam, it is also included. So from that perspective, as if you recall Richard's timeline, if I maybe ask Pablo to bring up that one, it's a bit further along. A couple more. Yes, thank you. So between now and the time of launching the online reporting tool, we will create we will update, as Richard indicated, not only the online reporting offline format, so that the reporting offline version, so that you can collect responses to it. We will also be making amendments and changes in the ORT according to these updates. And then very important to mention is that these changes that would also need to be added to part emanating from Article 4, those changes are relevant to the long or the full reports. In other words, those changes are not part of the questions that are going to be asked for the second short reports, but they will be part of the reporting cycle of the second full reports. And this is also part of how long it takes for the amendment to come into force, which is a year from the time of notification by the depository. So that amended annex was notified on the 28th of September and therefore would be for the 28th of September next year, just a couple of days before we meet for COP5. But yes, thank you for reminding me that there's also, of course, or for recalling, there's also, of course, that item that will be added to the updated one for the second full reports. Is there perhaps another question on the, and may I perhaps just open it up and not only ask you about the reporting guidance or perhaps and the reporting format, but do you have any other questions also on the presentations my colleague Lynn made and also Richard in terms of moving forward? We do still have a bit of time, and so we could delve into anything else additionally. I hope I'm seeing any messages that might still be coming. Let me just also say that if I can maybe ask Pablo to go back to the slide that shows the comment form for the reporting guidance. Thank you, Pablo. Besides the obvious contact details and so on, I just wanted to specify that there is, in fact, an area for general comments, as well. And here you may also have some other or additional comments or more narrated comments that you might have. And then the second part of that form, which is specific comments, is line by line. And here it could be that you might need more information on something, or it could be that there might be some wording where you may have an additional suggestion or a different suggestion or a query. So just to point out these two parts. And then, of course, please put into your calendars the 15th of December. It's a Thursday. To try to get that out before everybody's year of end break, to get that out of your worry list, so to speak, and we'll then take over to be able to utilize it for the next steps. We've indicated the Minamata general inbox on this, but should you need any other indication or any other clarification along the way while you're preparing it, please do not hesitate to reach out to us directly. I see another question. Thank you so very much, Michael, from the Swiss Ministry. Can we start our short reports before COP5, or the decision that might be taken during the COP5 would influence this work? So, Michael, thank you. That's a very important question. And I'm just thinking maybe one of those timelines would be helpful again, just to have maybe Pablo, as you can't read my mind, but could we have the timeline that Richard had that showed this one? Michael, the short reports you can see here need to be submitted by the 31st of December 2023, but we will open the online reporting tool, which is a very fancy word for a set of, well, a link with personalized login credentials to the national focal point. But we will open this tool in March, and so you could begin your report from March onwards. This short report, since it is about the question on primary mining, in other words, question 3.1, do or don't you have a primary mercury mine in your country? The second one is on stocks and sources. The third one is on receiving trade consent forms or consent forms to trade. And the fourth one on final storage. All those 4 questions are not subject to any specific decision at COP5. In fact, we've had the opportunity of clarifying some things following the first short reports. And so it is entirely possible to begin already, if you have the information already early available in the year, to begin in March when we open the portal to already begin your reporting. And let me also just say that you could begin your reporting and decide to finalize it later. So opening the portal and beginning does not mean you have to submit immediately. The portal is set up in such a way, the tool is set up in such a way that you can begin and you can return to it if you have to add additional information or anything else. But I do just want to maybe use this opportunity to highlight that the clarifications given at COP4 in that decision really pertain only to the areas in the short reports where there was a need felt for some clarification. In other words, there was, and it was also noted by the Compliance and Implementation Committee, Implementation and Compliance Committee, that we need to have the output of primary mercury mines in Mercury as opposed to in Mercury ore. There was some clarification on the forms for consent, and there was also some hesitation by some parties for a while about whether they would have to keep a continuous overview of the stocks, but the COP clarified, yes, indeed, it is an ongoing endeavor to keep an overview of the stocks within a national territory. And so those questions hopefully are now clear. We might make a prize for the first submitted report. So if you are up for it, we'd be happy to think of ways to show that. I do want to maybe if I could take you back to one other slide. Thanks, Michael. It looks like I've answered your question, but if I could maybe, Pablo, if you could take me to the slide that Lynn showed about submitting by the 31st of December. Yes, I would like to yes, this one. I just want to really just, on behalf of the entire Secretariat, just really congratulate parties here, because what the charts at the top show that for the first short reports, which was of course the first time around, and it was 4 questions, 56% of our parties reported on time. We later on worked with a number of parties with on time being by or before the 31st of December of the reporting year. And then we worked, of course, with many parties afterwards, and we've had a very high reporting rate at the end for the short reports, but it was initially 56 that were on time. For the full reports, which is even longer, we were blown away by the fact that 71% reported before or on the 31st of December. And if I can just take us back to the slide just before, Pablo. Here you can see the spike. So a number of countries really did already report in November, and many reported in December. And then I'm afraid many seem to work between those that celebrate Christmas and certainly New Year. And there was an enormous spike on the 31st of December. So we also like to save you from that dreadful date of needing to work right at the end of the year by opening the portal early and by encouraging you to submit early. The little dots you see afterwards is just that as countries or parties are able to complete their reports, and sometimes they needed a bit more time, they've been handing them in. So now overall we have 90% of our full reports in, which is really magnificent. We are very happy with our parties about that. Are there any other questions that I might miss? My colleague Richard just reminds me to also make the point that Once you've submitted a report, the process that we do is we check the report for completeness and just for coherence and clarity. And if there are items in the report where perhaps an attachment was not there or something seemed to be a little bit out of place, we will be in contact with you. We have a form there where we just make you aware of something we've noticed and ask if you wanted to make any more clarifications or any additional contribution or response. And in other words, and sometimes it does happen, it has happened that a party would be in touch and say, we need to add something to our national report. That's entirely possible. We still date stamp your report on your original submission, provided it was really overall complete. But if there's some extra information that comes in later that you wish to also have reflected, it can be added, and we have a protocol to set that up to ensure that anything you want additionally can be still added. Yeah, so now we do have 5 more minutes. Is there anything else that we might be able to tell you about in terms of national reporting? We are, I mean, this slide is part of, you are getting a first view of the dashboard that we are working on, so that over time, let me just also say, Lynn pointed it out already, that all the reports we have received, both the short reports and the long reports, get posted on our website, but we are working on a dashboard to bring you some information forward in a slightly easier way. And here are just the beginnings of this dashboard. And for us, it's of course very interesting to note that the reporting language predominantly is English, but also French and Spanish, and then Arabic and Chinese, fairly much smaller, of course. All national reports, all the reporting can be done in any of the 6 languages, though as the implementation and compliance committee works in English, when we receive a report in another UN language, we have it, we translate it for the use of the committee, and then you will see, maybe you've seen it already for reports that have been submitted in a language other than English, that you will see the original version report in the original language, but you will also see a translated version or a version that, a translated version, so which is for the use of the Implementation Compliance Committee, but it can also be for anybody visiting our website. And maybe lastly, we do, of course, in the UN try to mainstream our consciousness and work around gender. And so we did find it quite interesting to see just how many women, we almost 50-50, but we are a little bit on the top side with national focal points being women. But we're really happy that we have the whole planet, so to speak, and almost all of our parties now reporting and handing in their reports. With that, I think have I exhausted? I've almost exhausted our time. Is there any last question or any other thought that you may have? I must say I do see a number of names very familiar to us because they are our national focal points, but also a number of stakeholders, and that's also very important to us and others. If there is no question other than that, let me move to the last slide. Yes, in fact, you can read my mind, Pablo. The second last slide, which is to just alert you that this is, of course, one of a series of meetings we are making available, online meetings we are making available through our Minamata Online Season 3. And here you see the others as well. We had yesterday also briefings on the amended Annex A. If you wish to look at the briefing of that meeting, it's already uploaded on our website, and also our document, our PowerPoint with all the links to the relevant documents is also available. So today we have this briefing on the invitation for comments, but coming up, there is also from the science stream of our colleagues, there is a very interesting event coming up on how science can drive policy towards mercury-free ASGM. We have a continuation of work that was begun some time ago, an effectiveness evaluation. So there will be a briefing on the invitation for comments in November on that work. And there's, again, the science colleagues are doing an event early in December on health risk communication. And then you will also see in green some of the gender work. This comes out of a decision from COP4 as well, work towards the roadmap, and the invitation for participation has gone out a while ago in that regard, and these are our upcoming events. With that, it remains for me just to maybe invite my colleagues Lynn and Richard just to put on their cameras, but perhaps also Pablo, so simply because without Pablo at the back of it, nothing would work here on the front end. But just to thank my colleagues and to thank you for being with us. There you see Pablo. To thank you very much for being with us today and for your interest, continued interest in this topic of reporting and also the reporting guidance. If there's anything else that comes up as you consider this in the next days or weeks, simply reach out to us. We'll be happy to hear from you and happy to try to support as we can. With that, thank you very much. And until next time, please stay well. Bye-bye.